at a point in time when the name Africa or Ghana comes up, there's this, disgust.
When you draw that line, where do you sit to say it's enough for my child to know about?
It's quite challenging and it's very difficult to please children.
If today African children keep growing up and seeing themselves as side characters in the world's stories, what from your point of view does that quietly do to their future? Hello and welcome to the Rooted in Quality podcast, powered by Afro Quality. Today we are here to talk to a gentleman who built a career in advertising in Ghana and pivoted into academia and decided to find a niche so amazing and so interesting, and us at Afro Quality find to be very foundational to a lot of the things that we stand for. Writing books for kids and books that have themes for African stories across the continent. Delali Avemega, also known as Deli Brasco. Welcome, Dela.
Thank you, sir.
It's good to see you again.
Yes,
It's been a number of years.
Same here.
Now, to start with, if today African children keep growing up and seeing themselves as side characters in the world's stories, what from your point of view does that quietly do to their future and the future of the continent?
I think it strips them of their identity, if you ask me, because I'd say to some extent we're handicapped when it comes to development, which is why the West refers to us as a third world, and if it continues in that vein where there's little or less representation, then literally it strips us of identity. It puts us further back, backward, and that's detrimental, if you ask me.
Now, to push the envelope a little bit on that, what's our identity?
We're Africans. We're black. We have our culture, which is unique. There's a way Africans typically will carry themselves. There's a way would relate with the world. It's just that distinction. Something we have, that thing that sort of distincts us from the rest of the world, and that could be packaged positively, or as we see the narrative, could be packaged negatively to have a negative effect on us and our children.
What scares you the most when you look at the kind of stories that our children are consuming today?
They're consuming stuff that typically I'd say is not relatable. Stuff that they don't relate to, stuff that wouldn't have them represented in the adequately. Stuff that is foreign, because most of the kids here don't know what snow is. They haven't seen a reindeer before. They haven't, like Santa Claus, for instance. How does that impact on our children, And things typically, I want my children to understand the environment they live in. I want them to know where they come from, understand the culture, the language, the food, and everything that comes with it, to be honest.
Now, when you look at your life as a person and your journey, what's your earliest image of your childhood that told you who you were allowed to become? And to stretch it, how does that reflect in what you've committed your life to doing now?
So my story is unique. My childhood is quite unique because I spent my early years in the United Kingdom. So I grew up amongst white people, white folk, read their stories, and in coming back to Ghana, I felt I wasn't part of Ghana, including my siblings, because they were based here. And so even communicating with them at a point in time was a challenge. Several things around me didn't make sense until I grew and imbibed, some more of the culture, the environment, to come to understand who I was and what I was supposed to represent. So that in itself I mean, put me in a position to appreciate what typically happens when we don't imbibe what's ours, but imbibe something foreign and the effects or the impact that it has on us.
You worked in advertising.
Yes.
Couldn't, or the objective that you seek to achieve today with your publishing company and the stories, couldn't that have been achieved in advertising, where you are shaping stories for big brands that have a lot of impact and all the visibility?
You know, advertising is like a cell or a prison room, sort of.
Okay.
Yeah, and you have all these restrictions, the client literally telling you to toe a particular line. What we call creative freedom, you don't get to enjoy it or express it, I mean, to be honest. And so you're restricted. I mean, there are sets of rules. For some of us who were rebels, we literally suffered, the consequences. We faced the repercussions for being rebels at times, and that seriously didn't help. What advertising did for me was to appreciate the problem some more and to be able to apply those lessons to what I do today.
I want to push the envelope a little bit on the rebellious part. Give us one example of a time when in your advertising space you felt that conflict between what you felt was right or could be done versus what the client just wanted to do for the money or just to ship a work.
So a typical example is a brief for a client that had to, I think it had to do with, it was more financial, so within the fintech space. And this was the very early days when we had these fintech idea, springing up. And I chose quite a different art direction. Typically, I mean, you'd have what everyone is used to, but I because being a storyteller from way back, I wanted to, toe that line, tell a story. And that was quite evident in even how the approach that I used, And so instead of using pictures and having your typical headline and a photograph and a copy, I did something that looked like something you could find or take from a storybook. And we presented to the client. Unfortunately, the client was like, this wouldn't wash. This is not what we're used to. This is not what we, intend to do. And so we went for the typical, normal route. And I'm not surprised the company doesn't exist any longer. So that's just one of the instances where my rebellious, nature or attitude kind of showed up. And
now, I want us to talk a little bit more about your time in advertising.
Yeah.
And you've just started on a critical point where, though there's a lot of talk in advertising about storytelling and brands wanting to tell stories, most of the times it just comes down to the money and the client looking at their bottom line.
Yeah.
At what point did you feel like maybe the connection or the ability to tell stories in advertising wasn't for you, or that opportunity no longer existed? Because you were in the industry for quite a while.
Yeah, for probably a little over 16 years. Yeah. And well, I think I sensed it quite early.
Okay.
But then I had to,
the money was good.
Yeah. I had to make a living, and advertising for some of us, we admired the space from way back. Hearing all sorts of stories and reading books about advertising and how cool it kind of felt like. So yeah, but I think quite early in my life in advertising, I kind of sensed that it wasn't going to be as rosy and as beautiful as I initially perceived it to be. But I had to kind of move along with it, bearing in mind that I had other things I was doing which were outlets for channeling my creative frustrations, if I may say.
Now, with all those frustrations, you stayed for 16 years.
16 years, yeah.
Do you look back and regret?
Now, no.
There was a time when you regretted?
There was a time when I felt, I was used and
and dumped.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, but looking back at the time I spent in advertising, I think every moment mattered, and it's helped shape me into who I am today. It's giving me the eye to be able to do the things that I do, especially with Fish and Plankton.
Now, if we look at the stories that we tell in our societies, most of the times they get reflected back to us in the communications that brands put out there.
Yeah.
So there's always that connection.
Yeah.
Is there, or maybe what kind of African identity do you feel advertising rewards the most?
That's a very unique question. What will depend on how we kind of define the African identity when it comes to advertising. Yeah, I don't know if it's through could be the tone of voice. Yeah, sounding very African. I wouldn't say this sounds African, but Ghanaian. If you take, for instance, the club campaigns over the years, so they look for very unique Ghanaian moments. Moments, and then they but I think in that vein it's quite rewarding, because then you realize people would tend to lean towards that, because then they kind of see themselves there in the art, or it represents them. So that's an example I can give. For instance, like when it comes to club, picking Ghanaian moments, and even in terms of like the language and what have you. I mean, yeah.
Now, is there some kind of African identity that advertising seeks to erase or tends to erase quietly?
I can't necessarily pinpoint to something in particular, but I would say you still feel that there's a heavy Western influence.
Okay.
When it comes to how we make our arts, to be honest. So we tend to, this is how I see it. Advertising over the years has followed a template, and the template has been from the West.
Okay.
If you talk about advertising giants here in Africa, we probably have very few names we can mention. Whereas in the West, it's quite large. It's quite expansive.
Strongly tied to capitalism.
Absolutely. So for me, I think there's a template that we follow, and that kind of kills the identity thing. I mean, if you ask me, it kind of kills it. Even though the bits and pieces here, we tend to probably you could say maybe when it comes to like propping and all of that, we're fitting a few things in there, but that doesn't really work for me. I mean, it doesn't say much for me.
Now, knowing what you know today, do you think big corporates, and in this instance, African big corporates, there's something they could do to turn that around and have advertising speak a lot more the African language versus the template of just a Western kind of format?
Yeah. For example, if corporate institutions or people from the clients and understand that, look, people in advertising are originally storytellers, and allow them to tell the stories, very authentic stories that promote Africa, that have Africa, the African DNA embedded in them. That would change things, if you ask me.
You spent 16 years in advertising.
Yes.
What did you love about it that you still carry with you now that you even write for kids?
The people.
Okay.
The people I work with, the people I came across. I think that's what made the difference, because then I got to learn, I got to hear them, I got to share ideas with them and build relationships with them, which I think has helped me on my journey to be becoming what I currently am.
Now that you're a storyteller, writing your own stories, publishing your own stories, there's no middleman in there filtering for you. What did you have to unlearn from advertising?
The straitjacket template, stringent, influences, if you ask me. Um, I got to experience more of what they call creative freedom, and also a lot of research as well. Because in advertising, you have a brief coming from the clients, and you have a research department, you have a strategy department. So a lot of work gets done before the brief actually comes to you, from a designer's point of view. But here's the case where you literally have to do almost everything. Yeah. And then, which is why then the people I worked with and came across make sense, because some of this information that I got from them are what I use, to kind of help me sojourn and arrive at what I do.
Do you feel like being on your own then also maybe puts you at a little bit of a risk level, because if you get it wrong, you are like, there's nobody to hold the bag for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's risky, but naturally, I'm one who doesn't shy away from risk, and I believe it's better trying than not trying at all, so you can learn from your whatever mistakes or whatever thing you face.
You talked earlier on about your journey and pivoting into storytelling.
Yeah.
But coming from a creative space.
Yeah.
At what point do you feel like the creative exercise was, maybe let me put the question differently. When did storytelling stop being a creative exercise and start becoming like a passion that you have to pursue, and feel like, okay, these kids out there, they have the wrong stories in their heads and nobody is trying to fix it. So me, Delali, I'm the one who can go out there and fix it.
I've always had a passion for storytelling from my infancy. Books have been something I've always had with me. I read more books than watched television growing up, and so storytelling has always been part and parcel of my DNA. I just felt I needed the right environment and the maturity to pursue it, and I felt stepping out of towards the latter part of my advertising years, I just felt that there was a calling, there was a need to do this, and also becoming a parent. When I had my first child, that's when it dawned on me, hey, I would want to write a book for her to read, a book that represents her, a book that has elements in there that she's familiar with, a book that wouldn't look alien to her, but would be able to get her to understand things that are happening around her, and also appreciate herself, where she comes from, the color of her skin, the texture of her hair, and what have you.
Tell us a little bit more about that journey from a practical point of view.
Yeah.
Your latter days in advertising.
Yeah.
What were the steps? And then now, when you decided that you were going to write a book, at what point did it now become like, okay, it's not going to be one book, but it has to be 10 books or 15 books?
Yeah, so there's the legacy bit, because the advertising space is pretty ruthless, and you typically wouldn't get the recognition you desire to have. I mean, which,
even if you win a lot of gongos,
absolutely,
it's the company.
The company gets the recognition. So that's one of the things. I mean, I kind of reflected on, and advertising, at a point in time, advertising became too boring, if you ask me. I mean, it felt like I kept doing the same thing over and over again, and there was a need for me to step out of that space for mental sanity. And what a moment, to be becoming a father and then having a child, and then discovering the need to write, and having the skill to write, having the skill to illustrate, having the skill to design, and a bit of marketing insights. I felt, okay, it's such a glorious moment to jump out of one frying pan into another, and deal with it.
So from what you say, a lot of young people would probably listen to us, and usually when you hear the stories of entrepreneurs and builders, most of the times it's about, okay, I have this passion for this thing and I started doing it. But your story is more like you spent years building the foundations to
Absolutely.
get to the point where now you could actually do it, not because, oh, I'm passionate about it, but I'm now learning.
Yeah.
But you actually had the competency
Yes.
in that area. If you are to stop everything today
Yeah.
and get a ticket to run, I don't know, the biggest ad agency in Africa, would you take it?
No, I won't.
For all the money? And,
For all the money, I won't.
why?
It's just what comes with the space. I mean, it's stressful. It's stressful. I tell people most of my gray hairs are probably as a result of, the advertising hustle and sleepless nights and client wahala and what have you. Because writing for kids, it takes me back into my childhood. It makes me feel like a kid again. I dream as a kid. I tap into the little boy in me, to unearth some of these stories and concepts that I work on. And it's such a wonderful experience to have.
You don't feel stepping into that space now makes you a bit invisible versus where you were previously, were in the industry? You're like, okay, I know Delali, he's a creative director at a big agency.
No, it's absolutely the opposite. I mean, advertising wouldn't get me on CNN.
Okay.
Yes, advertising wouldn't give me an hour's documentary on CNN. No, it wouldn't get me into over 400 million homes on people's televisions. It didn't do that for me. This writing for kids did that for me.
In the industry,
Yeah,
publishing, writing, it's also very competitive.
absolutely.
When you joined, do you feel like maybe the market underestimated you?
Well, to some extent. To some extent, because you can't have like I think it's common with most spaces where you have gatekeepers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you have gatekeepers and people who are stalwarts within the industry who've been around for God knows how long, and so they own the space. I mean, I'd say I came from nowhere. I came from nowhere and started moving like a Tasmanian, devil or something. Yeah. So I call it a blessing, and one of the reasons why I've been able to do the amount of work I've done over the years is because, fortunately, I have the skill to write, to illustrate, to design, and a little bit of marketing due to my advertising background. So that's helped me. So you have like everything in one place, because there was no way I could afford to have people,
do all that
and
pay
and
them.
then pay them and then be able to produce this
The
much.
number.
Yeah.
I remember in one of our podcasts, we were talking to a gentleman in Uganda, and he has a similar story where he spent years working before he started his brand. And at a point, he said people in the industry who were like gatekeepers or established people started threatening his life. Have you had any incidents like that in the publishing space?
Threats, not necessarily, but you've had some people show, would I say, disdain, a bit of jealousy, and these are comments that would typically, come from you. Because I approached some people for help initially, and they never did. Probably they didn't buy into the dream, and they didn't believe, things could go the way they are now. And so for some of these people, they come back to you and like, wow, and typically people wouldn't share their trade secrets with you, but I'm the type who literally does it when people I don't even know approach me and that sort of thing. So threats, no, but you can tell that for some people, I've made some people uncomfortable.
For this part of the discussion, I want us to talk a little bit about the psychological process of children who are your core market.
Yeah.
And for me, it's a very fluid space to actually build a business in, because you're trying to build a business and make money.
Yeah.
But you are dealing with the impressionable brain of young people, and whatever you put in there is a foundation for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So it's not just business.
Yeah.
It becomes something more than just the money. Now, as a first step, based on what you know and you've experienced, how early do you think a child internalizes who they are allowed to be?
I think it's from a very early age. If you ask me, there's a theory. Erickson's it's related to child development, and
Okay.
it's about the psychology of children. So at every stage, children have needs, psychological needs, and it develops and it changes as and when they grow. So this is something I was privileged to have been introduced to by my one of my sisters who's a nurse, yeah, and that is one of the things initially I read before going into story writing for kids. So I'm able to, based on that concept, I'm able to structure stories in a way to cater for these needs for the kids per the stage, the stage in which the book kind of fits, and that sort of thing.
Do we? I have a question that I'm beginning to think we are probably living the reality of it.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, do we know what happens when a child's imagination is colonized before their language matters? But then I'm thinking about where we are, and we have a leadership. We have leadership that's grown up,
it's obvious, very obvious,
being very colonized, and now we can see the results.
Yeah. It's very. I mean, it's very obvious, and I for instance, things for me changed. Like I keep telling some folk that I'm quite close to that and when it comes to my journey, I think during my late teen years there was a book I read about an incarcerated African American guy and how he got this whole he became conscious, black history, black this, black that. And for me, one of the most iconic moments in my journey as an intellectual was when I chose the topic Pan-Africanism for my final year, university, project, and so reading, researching at the Padmore Library, researching on Du Bois, Garvey, all these guys kind of enlightened me, and that's what helped me embrace my blackness, sort of. So it's for me, I think it's very important because, and it's something that with Fish and Plankton we're trying to do, which is why currently we have a catalog specifically related to like the Pan-African story. Yes.
At Fish and Plankton today, what do you believe happens to a child's confidence when they recognize themselves in the story?
And they feel important, they feel relevant. Because if you grow up reading Snow White, Red Riding Hood, Jack and the Beanstalk, and all these stories, and see people that are different from you, you read books about the great achievers.
And there's no person in there who looks like you.
Absolutely. Then the whole narrative of you being a third-class citizen in the world makes sense. Yes, because then there's no one like you in there to give you that hope and get you to aspire to either be like them or to outdo them. Or it's.
What you just said brought a thought to mind. I remember one of Chimamanda's early talks.
Yeah.
She had said something. Chimamanda Adichie.
Yes.
She had said something about her view or her thoughts about books always needing to be foreign growing up, because her entire childhood she had always read books that were foreign. So she couldn't comprehend the idea that there could be something that's called a book that had anything that looked or represented her ecosystem. So I think what you said is
absolutely
it travels around.
And one of the most profound books I read growing up was the Makers of Civilization. Mm-hmm. And I never saw someone of my race in there or being represented in there. And this was one of the books that I loved reading, So it supports what we're saying.
What stories do you wish existed when you were growing up, now that you are old enough to understand the world?
Some of the stories I'm writing.
Okay.
So these are heroes, for instance, which highlights change makers from Ghana, change makers from Africa, and other parts of it. And the interesting part of it is because some of these people are not necessarily politicians. Some of them are very ordinary people. Like you take someone like Tete Kwashi, a farmer, but his deed could have so much impact on the country we live in. You understand? You take people like the Ephraim Amus, you take people like the Chino Achebes. These are, these are great men, and women who, the Amata Edus. These are great men and women who, if I'd read about growing up as a child, would have probably shaped me. Yeah.
Just as feedback though, These Are Heroes is one of the bestsellers. We actually ran out of that book in Kigali.
Okay.
So it has its own following, cult following of sorts, which is good. Now, from your experience in writing for kids and publishing, you talked about how your skill sets and like the diversity or the multiplicity of skill sets that you have helped you to build or move faster. What assumption did you have about writing for kids that turned out to be wrong, even when you felt you had the skills or the competencies before?
Initially I thought it was way easier. But then coming to find out, it's quite challenging, and it's very difficult to please children because of how honest they are, And so, yes, for me, it's been very challenging. But I love challenges and love to take on a challenge, and I've become used to it. If you ask me, because to be honest, if I have to write an article for something, of our standards, like per, our comprehension and appreciation, it's much more easier to do that. But then to come into a child's space, to think like a child, to act like a child, and the thing is, children will read your book, and if your book is trash, they will tell you. It's trash. Your book is not interesting, and that sort of thing. So it's very challenging. From the cover of the book to the back of the book, the whole process is a very challenging process.
So you've had times when you write a book and then you test it before you decide to publish?
Absolutely. The kids at home are the first point of...
Your children are the guinea pigs.
Yes. And it's interesting because I have right from a teenager to a toddler. So
you have the whole factory.
The whole factory. Yeah.
Now, do you have books that you felt like, oh, this is a great idea, and then you put it out and then you test it with the kids and they're like, nah, this is not gonna work, old one?
Yes. From the development stage, it's always been like that. The thing is, most of the time before the book comes out, I make sure, okay, at least it would appeal to a certain, category. Yeah, but yeah, there've been instances where I felt this book is going to be a bestseller, and this is it, and then it comes out, and the other books that typically I didn't have much, faith in have outdone. Yeah. But another thing about books too is they some of them are kind of seasonal. Like the appeal is kind of seasonal. So there are times when a certain book kind of picks up when it comes to sale, and then there are times when.
We'll talk a little bit more about conditioning, because when you deal with kids, it's like preparation for future. And I think I was reading something a couple of weeks ago about the battle now is for kids as consumers of the future.
Yeah.
So a lot of brands now are trying to figure out ways of getting into the kids' cartoons and books and things like that. Do you feel like what we deal with today as manufacturers or makers in Africa, and the fact that the average African doesn't find the need to consume African, do you think it's a reflection or a certain conditioning coming out of the stories they consumed when they were younger?
Absolutely. What you imbibe is what you you relay or you manifest literally, and that's been it for me. I mean, it's no coincidence that people of African origin would want to look exactly like a Barbie doll and not the Ikwaba doll.
Okay.
You understand? It's not a fault of theirs.
It's a conditioning.
It's a conditioning.
So adult consumption is really like a disguise for childhood longing.
Absolutely. Most of us are living what we saw and what we imbibed when we were young. So for some of us who probably watch Scarface and living like gangsters today, we're literally
coming from those stories.
For some of us who watched a road from Kukurintumi and trying to project the whole cultural, these are stories.
You talked about Scarface and I was smiling because back in the days his nickname was Delali Brasco.
Yeah.
from Donnie
Brasco. Yes,
from Donnie Brasco.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about this, I'm beginning to wonder, a lot of the brands that we are working with now in Afro Quality, maybe they should actually now find a lot of support for the work you're doing, because that's the future market. Because when we educate our kids properly, then the work becomes a lot more easier in making Africans see that quality things on the continent are worth patronizing.
Absolutely. It's normal to, for instance, I've had a couple of experiences with the books I write, where kids are supposed to show up at school dressed like their favorite character, and parents have sent me pictures of kids dressing up like Lulu.
Okay.
Wow. Yes.
And Lulu is one of the characters in your books. One of the
characters in here, and kids wanting to have their hair, made like Lulu, literally. Kids wanting to own puppies because Lulu has a puppy somewhere in the story, and that sort of thing. So it's happening right, within the space.
Now that this thought just came to mind, and basically, if I want to put it in business sense, literally, kids' stories or children's stories are like the upstream section of every consumption behavior that you want to build for the future.
Absolutely.
Is it not something that maybe a lot more of government infrastructure and policy should be focusing on? Come to think of it now.
Absolutely. I'll give you a typical example. There's the Paddington bear.
Okay.
Which is it's something the British parade. Apparently, it's a Peruvian thing. It's iconic. I mean, it originally came from Peru, but the British adopted it and they literally promoted that thing, and it's a huge thing. You understand, and it has stories and stories associated with it and that sort of thing. It's a typical example of how a character from somewhere becomes like an iconic symbol for a country. So when you now talk about the Paddington bear, you will typically think of Britain or the UK and nothing about Peru until you delve a bit into history to discover that this actually was something that the Peruvians owned, but probably didn't take it as far as they should have.
Writing for kids also comes with a lot of ethical considerations.
Absolutely.
Where do you draw the line? Do you even draw a line?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
What typically, what would you want kids to imbibe? What would you want them to see? I mean, it's the restrictions. You have to, the moral ethics. There's also when it comes to education as well. The certain based on the age and what you give them. I mean, there might be certain things which might be too big for them to swallow in relation to their age and what have you. And also you have religion. So there's a fine line not to kind of propagate a certain particular religion when it comes to your books. You could showcase that. I mean, for instance, in the case of Fish and Plankton, we've tried as much as possible to be inclusive to some extent. So when it comes to like religious tolerance, you see it there, which is a reflection of what we have here in our society.
country.
Yes, in our country, for instance, there's that religious tolerance, and so there's nothing wrong with having that, projected in the story, and that sort of thing.
So I'm going to push the envelope a little bit on that, because
Yeah.
recently there's a lot of controversy
Yeah.
around kids and the structure of what you put in education
Yes.
materials.
Yeah.
In the US, there's been a lot of running around where, especially within the minority communities, they feel like
Yeah.
they are reintroducing and changing certain things in the educational sector, which they feel is going to set the country back. In Ghana, we've had our own experiences. When you draw that line, where do you sit to say it's enough or it's important for my child to know about it because in the world out there it's available, but maybe from a religious point of view, okay, it's not something I support or something that I encourage? How do you manage that balance?
Well, first of all, we're Africans, and we have our traditions, we have our culture, and so that is one of the things we take into consideration, because who are we representing in these books? African children, basically. Yeah. So there's a conscious effort to make sure that everything happening in the book is relatable to what happens around us, so that the kids don't sit back and like, okay, this is something I'm not used to. Why would I have this thing in there? Why would I be seeing this thing, which could then, create an uncomfortable situation for us. So it's about respecting where we are coming from, who we are, and how we do things over here, and how to translate that into what we do.
To flip it from the moral line, along the lines of our history and who we are,
Yes.
versus where we want to get to or where we are heading.
Yeah.
How do you ensure that the African stories don't just represent like a caricature of nostalgia versus the possibility of what we can become for the child?
Yeah. So if you take, for instance, the Lulu stories, you realize that there are lots of goals and aspirations that these characters in there are pursuing. So it's not just touching on nostalgia and then tradition, but also giving and kind of empowering and inspiring these young minds to attain for greater goals and things. So it's not just touching on the nostalgia bit, but yeah, there's the aspirational. I mean, kids should be able to read these stories and wish to be better people, or to achieve greater goals and overcome challenges. That's it. Preparing them for what the world offers, literally.
Have you worried about getting it wrong? Like shaping the wrong narrative?
There's nothing like perfection. I mean, coming from a very honest and humble, but there's nothing like perfection when it comes to creativity. And besides, creatives, we operate, we operate with some freedom. And so there are times when you might slip off, but it's just recognizing when and where to, make adjustments so you can, stay in line, if you ask me.
How do you identify that you've made a slip off? Like what keeps you sane, or what keeps you on the straight and narrow path so you don't slip off?
Input, feedback.
Okay.
Because I'm interacting with parents, I'm interacting with kids. Right in my home, I have kids as well. I'm interacting with them. They're my first line of critics. And then it moves into, and I'm doing readings, reading these stories to the kids. Parents are around, and taking input from team members as well. It helps keep everything, balanced.
What mistakes do you think are the most dangerous when you are working with young minds?
Mistakes. I For me, mistakes are always a
Or what wrong narratives?
yeah.
Just speaking from the previous question, what wrong narratives are the most dangerous dealing with young minds? And I'd want you to maybe give examples from today, the world we live in today.
Well, there's a way they think. I mean, which is totally different from the way we think. I am very close with my oldest, who's a teenager, and so we engage, we talk, and then I kind of get how they perceive the world, which is way different from how we perceive the world, and even how they interpret things. In the moment, it's always interesting to work with them. Why? Because then from my side, I get to learn more and understand them. The other part is I am open to information, I'm open to suggestions, I'm open to whatever input that comes from there. The thing for me is, how do I use that? How do I run with that? If the narrative is skewed towards a particular, then how do we kind of get things
Bring
right?
it back.
Yeah, bring it back and that sort of thing. I don't have a firewall of some sort to prevent input, but then where there has to be guidance, I kind of where I feel that this is something resourceful. I'll give you a typical example. So I've had conversations with young minds regarding Kwekwanansi and why they don't tend to
affiliate or
associate with Kwekwanansi, the whole Kwekwanansi thing.
But they will do for Spider-Man.
Exactly. And the point is, Kwekwanansi is the whole Kwekwanansi thing it's been it's mundane. I mean, per current trends and how things are done. I mean, you can't tell a child a story of Kwekwanansi having all the wisdom in the world in a pot. Graphically, that's not possible. You understand? And having to climb a tree because he wants to stash all the knowledge there in the pot, and then the pot drops, and then in the days of our fathers and our mothers and our grandfathers, that will make sense. But today, no. If you tell a child that Kwekwanansi is this smart, savvy tech guy who is hacking systems and probably hacking AI and putting all this information and creating another platform where he's storing all this data so he can, then that makes sense. So if you put Kwekwanansi in that frame, yes. And that was a conversation I had with them, and they made me understand that it would make sense if you have Kwekwanansi now being this,
working as a hacker,
and that story now, and having that story remade to sound like this would make absolute sense to them. But having the pot, I mean, how many of them even know what a pot looks like anyway?
So there's a real risk that a lot of the stories that we carry from old, from years back, could die from irrelevance if we don't modernize them or bring some new modern flavor to it.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a typical example. You take Lion King, which originally is African, right? But look at, I'm sure if you take the original Lion King story from folklore, I'm sure some place around East Africa, that's where the story originated, and compare it to what
it's become,
you would notice that there's been
conscious effort
to make it more modern and relatable. But if they had kept it the way it was from like back then, I don't think it would do the magic it's doing today.
So now we have you, so you make that part of the mission to modernize a lot of the folklore stories.
Absolutely, if I get the right funding
and the support. On that, so technology. What role do you see technology play today? Because we can see clearly that, yes, it's important for kids to read and all that, but visual representation also means a lot and helps with the process of imbibing a lot of these content. What role do you think technology is playing?
Technology is making things way easier than before. For instance, I take my process when it comes to illustration, I typically wouldn't use a pen or a pencil and a piece of paper, which I used to do back then. Everything is done on the computer. And you look at with the introduction of AI is making things much more easier. Like, I'll give you a typical example. Back then in advertising, one of the most painstaking processes was looking for stock images. Yes. To do art and then creating mock-ups. You understand? Now you can get that done with just an AI prompt. Yeah, that's it. So it's making life much more easier. I mean, it's making creatives, have some time, instead of spending a longer time to produce work. And even when it comes to writing, one of the conferences I attended last year, I mean, we touched much on AI and how that's enhancing like copywriting, proofreading, and things like that when it comes to the literary space and that sort of thing. And it's been very helpful,
But to push the extreme, do you see a risk that AI could pose a threat to writers and businesses like yours? Because tomorrow I can wake up and feed or train an AI agent with a lot of the folklore and stories and everything, and then start prompting it to give me different versions and variations of all these stories.
Yes and no. Yes and no. So it depends on how authentic or original you are. I mean, if my story is an original story and it's not a story that's already been in existence, or if it's a story that doesn't necessarily follow a template, I mean, I still have my uniqueness and authenticity to run with. But where everything seems to be generic, that's when you have that challenge of having AI, being a threat and all of that. And it's even as an illustrator, for instance, I don't have a like one style of illustration. So if you go through my books, you realize the different. You always need to be ahead of the curve, yeah, which is helpful.
As we seek to wrap up on this discussion, I have a number of questions about the future, about legacy, and if today Fish and Plankton books succeeds fully, what changes in how Africans see themselves do you expect, or do you foresee to have happened?
So I'll give you one typical story, which is close to home, because I have siblings who live abroad, who are based abroad, who have children, right? And at a point in time when the name Africa or Ghana comes up, there's this, disgust and dislike. I mean, it was a threat to them for you to even mention Ghana or Africa. Yes. But guess what? The first time these kids got to read my books, it changed that concept. Why? Because in the story, they saw illustrations, and these illustrations were so beautiful and were depicting Africa in the right way. So it wasn't what typically you'd see
in the news.
Yes, in the news and that sort of thing. And for me, being an African author and then traveling and having books that sort of tell what's right and what's good about us has been a pride. And I believe that children who read my books kind of carry that same, pride, and also it's changing the perspective as well.
If you failed in this work, what would be the cost, and how deep would that cost be if you compared it to the cost of abandoning advertising?
Years lost, time wasted, but then I'll be consoled because at least I tried and it didn't work. If I didn't try at all, then that would be when I'd have bigger regrets. But it's always best to try and at least not regret about it later.
When your children grow up, what do you hope they would understand about why you decided to do this, to pursue this path?
First of all, they should know that they were the greatest inspiration for doing this, and also trying to help them appreciate who they are and where they're coming from and where they intend to go.
Delali Avemega,
Yes, sir.
it's been wonderful having this conversation with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Deli Brasco.
Yes, sir.
It's been an amazing conversation, Dela. Thanks for joining us. And we wish you the best and looking forward to collaborate more. And as we grow and scale Afro Quality, we hope to carry your books with us and spread it across the continent.
Thank you.
Thank you once again.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.